I received a strange call from one of my cheating wife's friends, demanding a meeting. Yes, I do. I have a transcript of a phone call Mrs. Wilson made before moving out. In this conversation, she admits to planning to stage injuries and blame her husband to gain leverage in court. The original recording is available if needed. Hey. Welcome back to Reddit Cheating Stories. Infidelity. It's messy, heartbreaking, and comes with consequences, yet it happens every single day. And today, I've got another story to share with you that's nothing short of dramatic. Buckle up, because this one's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. Where did you get this? She asked in shock. Really? I show you a clear photo of you passionately kissing another man on the dance floor. And your first question is about where I got it? Does it matter? Does knowing where I got this change the fact that you cheated on me? I asked my wife, the woman I've been with for 7 years. Brian, I know this looks bad, and I admit we kissed, but it's not cheating. Look at the photo. We're surrounded by people. It didn't go any further, she replied defensively. So that's your explanation? No word on who this man is or why you're kissing him like that. And you think it's fine because it didn't lead to anything more? Is this what you think honoring our marriage vows looks like? Tracy, I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Brian, I see you're upset, but I promise it's nothing to worry about. We just got caught up in the moment. It happened, but it doesn't mean anything. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said with certainty. Blowing it out of proportion? You haven't even told me his name. Why should I feel bad about someone I don't even know? I said with sarcasm. Does it matter what his name is? If I tell you, you'll probably do something stupid like start a fight. I won't let that happen. He'd destroy you, she shot back. I see. Thank you for your honesty, Tracy. You've made your choice. Now I'll make mine, I replied coldly. I turned and went upstairs, grabbing a suitcase and throwing clothes into it. What are you doing? She asked, panic in her voice. What does it look like? Unpacking, I said flatly. Why? She demanded. Because I can't stand another minute of your lies and deceit. I need to get away and think before I do something I'll regret, I replied, barely controlling my temper. Brian, don't be stupid. You'd never hurt me, she said, trying to sound confident. Well, until today, I thought you'd never cheat on me. Apparently, we don't know each other as well as we thought. Cheating? Who said I cheated on you? Kissing isn't cheating, Brian, and you know it. She yelled. Kissing isn't cheating? Is that your argument? I asked, pulling out another photo. What about this one? A nice picture of you on your knees in front of him. And in case you think that's not convincing, here's another one. It sure looks like night by then, doesn't it? Tracy stared at the photos, her face pale. Where did you get these? She asked, her voice shaking. Does it matter? Does knowing where I got them change the fact that you cheated on me? I asked, my voice rising with anger. She dropped the photos and began to sob, reaching out to hug me. Don't touch me, Tracy. Communication is a two-way process. I gave you the chance to be honest and start over, but apparently I don't deserve the truth. I might have stayed for our son if you've been honest, but you're incapable of that. I picked up my phone. If you call me for anything other than an emergency with Bobby, I'll block your number. Is that clear? She nodded, tears streaming down her face as I walked out the door. My anger and pain nearly unbearable. That Friday evening, I checked into a motel. I needed time to think. My first instinct was to divorce her, but that meant Bobby would grow up in a broken home, and I'd likely end up paying alimony. It was infuriating to think I'd be financially supporting her while she might continue with her behavior. I spent the weekend reflecting. The absence of my wife and son weighed on me heavily, and the loneliness was overwhelming. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next day, Tracy began sending me messages, but I ignored them. My mind wandered back to our early days. After earning my engineering degree, I took a job at a local chemical lab. 5 years later, I was promoted to facility manager at a flagship R&D center 1,000 miles away. The role came with a significant salary increase, and we moved, leaving behind family and friends. Tracy took a job at a credit card call center with over 200 employees, most of them her age. At first, everything seemed fine, but now, reflecting on the photos and her defensive attitude, I couldn't help but question how well I knew the person I thought I'd spend my life with. My decision wasn't easy, but it became clear we both needed space to figure out the next steps in our lives. A year after we moved, little Bobby was born. I suggested Tracy stay home since my income was more than enough, but she enjoyed the camaraderie of her coworkers. Her colleagues quickly became our mutual friends. We were part of a loosely connected group of 6 to 12 couples who met about twice a month, sometimes at someone's house, often at a restaurant or club. The women were all Tracy's colleagues, and the men, like me, were their husbands. While I had friends at work, Tracy made sure our social life revolved around her work circle. I didn't mind, as everyone was quite pleasant. The women, without exception, were strikingly attractive, and their husbands were equally polished and charming. I often felt out of place among the sharp, elegant men of the group, but they never treated me differently. When Tracy and I started having problems, I noticed something peculiar. Tracy didn't just tell me she was struggling. She shared our private issues with this group, even the intimate details of our marriage. It was alarming and humiliating to realize they all knew what she had done before I had the chance to process it myself. The only person who didn't reach out was Tracy. She knew I meant it when I said I'd block her number if she called or texted me. Cassidy, her best friend and constant companion, was at the forefront of arranging an intervention. She wanted to meet at her house on Sunday evening at 6 p.m. I suspected a trap. They could easily block my car, or the men might physically prevent me from leaving if I didn't agree to their terms. Instead, I proposed meeting at Angus Steakhouse. Take it or leave it. There, I could park freely and leave whenever I wanted. Reluctantly, they agreed. I had several reasons for attending. First, I wanted answers. Why did Tracy do what she did? Second, I wanted to gauge the group's stance on infidelity. Whose side were they on? Lastly, I needed to know if they had any role in Tracy's betrayal. Did they know? Did they encourage it? If they knew, why didn't anyone warn me? I deal with problems daily as a facility manager. I'm used to tough conversations and wasn't about to back down. I entered the restaurant, half expecting the group to be huddled, preparing their strategy. The thought made me laugh. As I approached the table, there was only one open seat, next to Tracy. She stood to greet me, but I stopped her mid-step. If you don't mind, I'll sit at the far end of the table, away from her. If you do mind, I'll find another table entirely. Cassidy quickly intervened before Tracy could respond. Of course, that's fine, Brian. Jared, give Brian your seat at the end of the table, please. Turning to me, she added, You're our guest tonight, Brian. Dinner is on us. We were seated in a private section of the restaurant, likely for confidentiality. After everyone placed their orders, I seized control of the conversation before anyone else could speak. I handed out 2 copies of a photograph showing Tracy passionately kissing another man on the dance floor. One photo faced left, the other right. You all seem very eager to help Tracy and me resolve our differences, I began. I'm shocked she discussed such a private matter with all of you before coming to me. This shows her complete disrespect for me and our marriage. Cassidy opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. Before any discussion begins, I need an answer, and I need it now. Look at this photo. Tracy is kissing another man, someone she refuses to identify. I'm sure at least one of you knows who he is. If you're so intent on helping, the first step is honesty. If you can't give me that, then there's nothing more to discuss. Silence fell over the table. Even Cassidy, usually quick with a response, said nothing. No one claimed ignorance or denied knowing the man. Not one of them offered to say who he was. I got my answer. Thank you for your time. I hope someone is very hungry and can eat my steak because I just lost my appetite. No one here seems genuinely interested in helping us repair our relationship after everything I've said. I stood up from the table and left. Tracy called me, begging me to come back, but no one else did. It was clear now that these friends were hers, not mine. Tracy, Cassidy, and the group were stunned. They had planned for a reasonable discussion, but my direct demand derailed the entire meeting. They hadn't prepared for that. What I didn't mention at the restaurant was that I had already checked out of the motel. On my way home, I grabbed something to eat from a fast food drive-thru. Once I got home, I paid the nanny Tracy had hired for the evening, thanked her for her help, and quickly ate my meal. Afterward, I moved my clothes and personal items into the spare bedroom. Over the weekend, I went to a local hardware store and purchased matching locks for the spare bedroom and bathroom doors. I installed them myself and kept the keys. It wasn't to avoid verbal confrontations with Tracy, but to prevent her from attempting to seduce me in the shower or during the night while I slept. Once I was settled, I spent time with my 3-year-old son, Bobby, the light of my life. I gave him a bath and tucked him in a bed. Sitting by his bedside, I watched him sleep peacefully, tears streaming down my cheeks. Tracy must have realized I was home because my car was in the garage when she returned around 10:15 p.m. They must have done some serious brainstorming after I left the restaurant, or she was back with her lover. I wasn't sure which, as sad as that sounded. She ran upstairs, clearly happy to see me back, and found me in Bobby's room. She started to speak, but I waved her off before she could enter. "There's no need to disturb his innocent sleep," I said quietly. After I closed the door, she tried to hug me, but I stopped her. Undeterred, she smiled and said, "I'm so glad you're back home where you belong. Let me make you something to eat. We have so much to talk about. I've already eaten, but thanks. So, where have you been all this time? Entertaining your lover again?" I asked coldly. "No, I just left the steakhouse." They can confirm this. They helped me find the right words to get us back on track. "I have so much to tell you," she explained. "I'll talk to you about whatever you want after you tell me the name of your lover. If you can't do that, we have nothing to talk about." I can't. I just can't," she said softly. "I'd like you to be at least half as devoted to me as you are to protecting him. I'll stay in the spare bedroom until further notice. Please stay away from me and never touch me. Who knows what disgusting diseases you might have right now, but I won't let you keep me away from my son. He needs me as much as he needs you. If you ever decide you're ready to talk, the first word out of your mouth will be your lover's name. If you're willing to sacrifice our marriage to protect him, then so be it. But until then, don't say another word to me." With tears streaming down her face, she nodded and left, her head hanging low. The next week passed without a single word exchanged between us, except for conversations involving Bobby. Finally, on Monday evening after work, I returned home to find a big surprise. Something fell off before I even walked through the door. The first words out of my mouth were, "Where is Bobby?" "I took him to the nanny's house earlier. She got him ready for the night," Tracy explained. "I see," I replied, surprised. "There was pre-planning that I wasn't involved in, but I didn't see your cars parked on the street." "We all wanted to surprise you, Brian," Cassidy chimed in. "So we parked a block away and walked. We couldn't risk you driving by if you saw all our cars." "Well, you certainly took me by surprise. What's going on? Why are you all here? Has something changed that I don't know about?" I asked. "Yes, honey," Tracy began. "Can we all go to the living room and explain ourselves now? I'm ready to answer your question." "Certainly, but first I need to use the restroom. I've just gotten home. I'll join you all in a moment." I excused myself and headed to the bathroom in the hallway. After relieving myself, washing my hands, and composing myself, I began recording with my phone, placing it discreetly in my shirt pocket so the camera was barely visible. I walked into the living room, where I was surprised to see 2 unfamiliar faces. I immediately recognized the man Tracy had been cheating with, sitting next to a younger woman. Tracy began, "Brian, you've already met everyone here, except for Elliot Franklin and his wife Gail. They're longtime members of our group, but you've never had the chance to meet them before. I know this might come as a shock, but since you insisted on knowing who he is, we all decided this was the best way to tell you. If you try to attack him, all the guys here have agreed to intervene. We don't want anyone getting hurt. So, you're finally giving me a name, huh?" I replied sarcastically. "A little late to start worrying about anyone getting hurt, isn't it? None of you seem concerned about how much I've been hurt. Your only concern is keeping him safe, isn't it? Don't worry. I have no intention of touching him. I wouldn't want to risk catching whatever diseases he might have shared with Tracy." A disappointed groan rippled through the group. Cassidy interjected, "Brian, we understand your frustration, but there's no need for harsh language. Let's speak calmly and professionally as friends while we resolve this matter. We're trying to give you what you asked for. You wanted his name, and now you have it. We thought you might want to speak with him, which is why we've arranged for this meeting. But Elliot doesn't need me to speak for him. He can speak for himself." Elliot stood up, and extended his hand. I'm afraid we've started off on the wrong foot. I hope that by the end of this meeting, we can at least treat each other with respect. May I call you Brian? I didn't move to shake his hand and kept my tone cold. Since we're just meeting for the first time, Mr. Franklin, I prefer you call me Mr. Wilson. I can't imagine us being friends, which would justify such familiarity. Secondly, you just promised respect after having shown me the utmost disrespect. Am I supposed to ignore that and reciprocate your feelings? Elliot nodded slightly. Fair enough, Mr. Wilson. My offer was about our current discussion, not past actions. If you'll allow me, I'd like to talk about what happened between me and your wife. Don't say her name or call her my wife. That title may not last much longer, and I'm not happy about it. You can call her the woman I married. Now go on. Elliot took a deep breath and began. Look around this room, Mr. Wilson. What do you see? I'll tell you. A room full of extraordinarily attractive men and women, including yourself and the woman you married. Do you think that's a coincidence? It's not. People like us naturally gravitate toward each other. As our friendships deepened, so did the level of trust and intimacy we share. Every person in this room is in a happy, stable, committed relationship. He paused, then continued. Our group believes that once trust is strong and unshakable, nothing can separate us from our partners. That confidence allows us to share experiences, sometimes deeply personal ones, without jeopardizing our relationships. For example, my wife, Gail, is here tonight. She's as beautiful to me as anyone in this room, and I love her deeply. No man, including you, will ever take her from me. That's why I'm comfortable sharing her with others in this group, just as she is comfortable sharing me. I scanned the room, noticing how the women were provocatively dressed, emphasizing their assets without crossing into vulgarity. They smiled at me in a way that felt unnervingly flirtatious. Elliot continued, this arrangement strengthens our relationships and benefits everyone involved. It's not about infidelity. It's about mutual understanding and trust. I crossed my arms and leaned back. So, Mr. Franklin, you're telling me that your arrangement includes sleeping with my wife. Does that make you feel more committed to your marriage? Elliot hesitated for a moment before replying. Mr. Wilson, I understand how this might seem, but I assure you, the bond between my wife and me is unshakable. I hope you can see that such experiences can coexist with deep, lasting love. You've got some nerve, I said coldly. If you think I'll ever condone or accept this, you're delusional. The fact that you're here trying to justify what you did tells me everything I need to know. Tracy, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Brian, please try to understand. I cut her off. I think I've heard enough. There's nothing more to say until you're ready to take full responsibility. Good night. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them stunned in silence. We are both learning and growing beyond what would be possible by remaining monogamous. It is an outdated and archaic term that no longer binds people together as effectively as true love, which consists of trust, intimacy, understanding, sharing, and opening up horizons to great and wonderful things for our marriages. How nice for you and your wife, Mr. Franklin, and the rest of this group to have your arrangement. But this has absolutely nothing to do with me and the woman I married, I said sharply. Sorry, Mr. Wilson, but didn't you just admit that you have less trust, understanding, and confidence in your relationship than every other couple in this room? Don't you see how wonderfully you could benefit and expand your relationship by opening up to this? He gestured broadly to include everyone in the room. If what you say is true, Mr. Franklin, then you just called every woman in this room, including the woman I married, easy. I'm outraged that you turned her head and moral compass so easily. Your actions are despicable and disgusting. A gentleman never interferes in a marriage relationship, as you clearly have done. I see where your logic is leading, Mr. Wilson. Rest assured, this is not one-sided. You are also invited to embrace the concepts we all hold dear here. You could be with any woman in this room right now if you desired. When you and the woman you married became part of our group, it was inevitable that you would be approached to participate at all levels. The woman you married, through her daily interactions with colleagues, discussed this topic apprehensively, worried about your possible reaction. It was only after exhaustive conversations with her on the matter that she agreed to a one-time experiment to see if this was something you both could benefit from. She was wary at first, but soon became convinced that the experience could improve your relationship. If you hadn't confronted her so harshly that night, she planned to raise the issue with you and discuss the potential benefits. Mr. Wilson, she said your accusatory confrontation confused her before she had the chance to fully explain everything. She panicked and retreated into defense, unsure how to navigate the hostile atmosphere you created. I'm confident that you'll agree with what we suggest is beneficial for you and her. All we need is to find a way to make you feel more comfortable with the idea. I see, I said, pretending to consider his words. I turned to Tracy and asked directly, is this all true? You discussed this with them without my knowledge, and then agreed to test the waters with Mr. Franklin to see if this was good for us as husband and wife, without even discussing it with me first. Tracy nodded nervously before explaining. They told me how wonderful it was to have this open relationship and how it strengthened their marriages. I wanted the same for us. When I went through this experience with Elliot, I wanted to see if it could improve our relationship. Please believe me, my love for you has never wavered. I only wanted to show you what I learned from him to convince you that being involved would benefit us both. She smiled sweetly, thinking she'd finally managed to explain herself. So, you expect me to believe that just one session with this self-proclaimed super lover changed everything? This wasn't actually your first time with him, was it? Her eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet my gaze, confirming my suspicions. Mr. Franklin interrupted. Don't you see, Mr. Wilson? We helped her understand the benefits. You might as well join us and embrace what we offer. There are benefits you may not have even considered. Please enlighten me about these supposed benefits, I said, barely containing my anger. Well, Mr. Wilson, he began, she will learn valuable lessons during her time with me and others and bring that knowledge back to you. Her experiences will broaden her horizons and make your intimate life more exciting. I assure you, I'm a very experienced and attentive lover. Under my guidance, she will blossom, grow, and ensure you benefit from her new skills. I stared at him, incredulous. So you think of yourself as some kind of Casanova? Mr. Wilson, I'm only sharing my experience. I mean, no insult, but she mentioned that she wanted to try new things. I turned to Tracy, my voice cold. When have I ever resisted trying something new? If you thought we needed to spice things up, why didn't you talk to me before jumping into bed with him? She looked away shyly. Please don't take it as a bad thing, darling. I wanted to help us. Help us? I repeated, my voice rising. You didn't help us. You betrayed me. You've turned something sacred into a joke, and now you expect me to embrace it? Let me be clear. This is not about us. It's about your selfish desires. Tracy opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to silence her. Enough! I've heard all I need to hear. Mr. Franklin, you and everyone else in this room can enjoy your arrangement, but I won't be a part of it, and I won't forgive her betrayal. You all think this is love? It's a mockery of everything marriage is supposed to be. Without waiting for a reply, I stood up and walked out of the room. You're such a gentle and sweet lover, and that's what I need most of the time, but sometimes I want things to be more energetic and direct. That's what Elliot showed me. He never tried to take your place in my heart. He's your complete opposite and showed control and dominance that I really liked. I barely managed to restrain myself from lunging at him and breaking his neck. Any thought I had of rebuilding our relationship for the sake of our son dissolved completely. Inside, a storm raged, beating endlessly in my chest. On the outside, I maintained a calm facade, slowly coming to a quiet conclusion. Divorce. My new mission was to gather ammunition, to prepare to repel the blow, and create as much chaos as possible for those involved in the destruction of my home. To do this, I needed to appear hesitant, giving them hope that I might consider their proposal. I let my gaze linger on the women in the room, not hiding my implied interest. So let me get this straight, Mr. Franklin, I said, feigning curiosity. Are you telling me I can have any woman in this room to fulfill the fantasies I've kept hidden throughout my married life, simply because the woman I'm married wasn't ready for them? Tracy looked offended but said nothing, likely afraid to jeopardize the potential agreement. Exactly, Mr. Wilson, Franklin replied enthusiastically. Any woman you want. They're all here for you. I've had the pleasure of creating unforgettable memories with each of these ladies, so I speak from experience. You can even enjoy my wife, Gail, if you'd like. The electricity in the room was palpable as they waited, expecting my lust to override my logic. Normally, Tracy could sway me with ease, but not tonight. Well, Mr. Wilson, or can I call you Brian now? Franklin asked, smiling smugly. Brian will do, I said, pretending to concede. Thank you, Brian. So, do you see our group in a better light now? Will you and Tracy join us in this new level of intimacy? You won't regret it. Your marriage will only grow stronger, I guarantee it. As much as it pains me to say this, literally, I joked, I need more time to process everything I've heard tonight. Tracy and I need to have private, one-on-one conversations. Once we've cleared some things up, we'll let you know our decision. Is that acceptable? Franklin's fake smile faltered briefly, but he quickly recovered. He hadn't anticipated the delay, but knew he had no choice. Of course, take all the time you need. As he nodded, 3 men suddenly grabbed me and held me in place. I couldn't move, but I didn't feel physically threatened, just caught off guard. Tracy approached, pulling my phone from my shirt pocket. She began clicking away, deleting my recordings. Brian, she said with forced calmness, please understand. We want to trust you, we really do. But until you fully commit to us, we need to protect ourselves. It was obvious you were recording tonight, and we just can't take that risk right now. Tracy handed the phone back to Franklin, who checked it before returning it to me. Everything is gone, she confirmed. This blatant betrayal stung more than anything that had happened before. Franklin, however, seemed unfazed. You see, Brian, don't be disheartened. I truly believe you were recording for good intentions, perhaps to help you decide who you'd prefer to start with when you join us. But we can't take the risk. There's too much at stake. I'm sure you've seen enough tonight to make your decision, though. He patted me on the back, and the group began filing out of the house. Some of the women shot flirtatious glances my way, gesturing as if to say, call me. After the last guest left, I grabbed my keys and headed toward the garage. Where are you going? Tracy asked, bewildered. To pick up Bobby, if that's okay, I replied coldly. I was hoping we could, reconnect tonight. She's expecting him to stay over, so there's no rush, right? Tracy said seductively, twirling her hair and posing provocatively. I miss my son. Apparently, you don't. I'll be back soon, I said sharply, ignoring her pout and walking out the door. I drove to the Angus Steakhouse. I hadn't eaten dinner and was still hungry from the dish I'd missed last time. The meal didn't disappoint. As I savored the tender steak, I turned the evening's events over in my mind, strategizing my next move. I hoped that everything would turn out as I planned. Only time would tell. The kind Mrs. Stevenson thanked me sincerely for the generous tip I added to her regular hourly rate. I thought I might need to win her over in the near future, separately from Tracy. Bobby was thrilled to see me, and I made him laugh all the way home. I bathed him, fed him, and put him to bed. Later, Tracy informed me she was making something light for us since we hadn't had dinner. I told her I had already eaten and she should just take care of herself. Annoyed by my pettiness, she stayed away from me, likely not wanting to upset Bobby with our upcoming talk. Since it was Monday evening and we both had work the next day, I started preparing for bed. She wanted to talk. What's going on, Brian? You seemed very interested in Elliot's proposal for our group, and then you rejected me like a hot potato. What happened? I'm glad you asked. Let me answer your question with a few questions. Maybe your answers will give you some insight, I suggested. Go ahead, she agreed. Right before they left, 3 men grabbed me in my own home, and you didn't say anything about it, right? It wasn't like that, she protested. Isn't it? 3 men grabbed and held me in my own home. Yes or no, Tracy? Did that happen? Yes, but before you object, just answer. Yes, they did. And you didn't say a word of protest to any of the other witnesses, who were also silent. Yes or no? Tracy, just answer yes or no. No, she answered quietly. Good. Now listen to the next question carefully. I don't want to repeat myself. You admit you didn't object when I was held in my own home. You also admit that you took my phone and deleted the records, not at my request but at someone else's. Is this true, Tracy? Yes or no? Tracy looked down at her feet. Yes, that's true. I didn't think of it that way. You're making it sound like a betrayal on my part, she added defensively. It was a betrayal, Tracy. Now, back to your questions. Why did I reject you like a hot potato? What happened? Your own answers reveal the truth. You proved tonight that you were on their side, not mine. Not ours. Theirs. If you don't mind, I'm going to sleep alone tonight again. Tracy began to sob as I walked away, leaving her in the hallway to reflect on her behavior. Of course, I locked my door. Around 4 a.m., I heard someone trying to doorknob. After 3 or 4 unsuccessful attempts, she gave up. The next morning, I spoke with the vice president of facility management at work. Dan, can you recommend a divorce lawyer? I mean a good one who will fight as hard for a man as he does for a woman. Please tell me you're not asking for yourself, Dan said, concerned. Unfortunately, I am. I figured a man in your position might know someone. I know Ted Ruswell, our contact at the firm that handles all our legal matters. I'm sure he can recommend someone. Let me call him and get back to you. Thanks, Dan, and no need to talk. This will stay between us. You have no idea how nice it is to hear that. Thanks, Brian. By 2:30 p.m., I had an appointment with Beat Thoron, Ted's recommendation. To my surprise, Beat was short for Beatrice. She explained that her caseload was 70% female and 30% male, but assured me that she fought passionately for all her clients. It didn't take long to convince her of my position as the injured party, and she agreed to take my case. She warned me about child support, explaining that I'd likely have to pay until Bobby turned 18 and college expenses might also be included. I'm fine with providing for my son, but I want at least 50 to 50 co-parenting on a weekly or bi-weekly schedule, I said. She couldn't make any promises but vowed to fight hard for those terms. Regarding alimony, she explained that based on income differences, I'd likely be required to pay for 3 to 5 years, depending on the judge. The usual rule was 1 year of alimony for every 2 years of marriage, capped at 10 years. Although I would have to live with it, the thought of paying her to continue sleeping with other men disgusted me. With plans to grow our family, Tracy and I had spent years researching house plans and available lots to build our dream home. I had sketches of features we wanted for our special hideaway. Now, all those dreams were nothing more than smoke. At least there was no house to sell, divide, or dispute. Bobby wasn't attached to any particular residence at his young age, so if Tracy continued renting the house, it wouldn't matter to me. Regardless of the number of her betrayals, the conclusion was clear. We were heading for divorce. B explained that in our state, the average time to finalize a divorce was 8 months for an uncontested case and up to a year for a contested one. I hope to be among the 8-month cases. Remaining tied to someone who had cheated on me held no appeal now that my decision was final. B also mentioned there was no financial advantage to filing on the grounds of infidelity, but such grounds could be helpful if custody became contentious. Divorce papers could be served as early as Thursday afternoon. I requested they be delivered to Tracy at her workplace at 10 a.m. Friday, where friends and co-workers could witness the event. After resolving the divorce details and agreeing to BEA's fee, I brought up another legal matter that needed immediate attention post-divorce. That evening, Tracy was already in the kitchen preparing dinner when I got home. Unlike my usual routine, I avoided the kitchen and went straight upstairs to shower. Using the bathroom down the hall now left fewer opportunities for her to lure me into any physical interactions. I took a change of clothes with me, practicing how to live separately under one roof. When I emerged from the bathroom fully dressed, she was waiting for me in the hallway. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Bobby is already in his high chair in the kitchen. You smell so good, she said with a smile. I'll be right down. Thanks, I replied, ignoring her remark as I opened the spare bedroom door. The tension was palpable, but she didn't say anything harsh during dinner. Eventually, she began, I'd like to explain what happened with the phone last night. Go on, I'm listening, I said calmly. While you were downstairs selecting potential partners, and the 3 of us were upstairs alone, Elliot told me he knew you were recording the events. He said it wasn't fair to expose everyone to professional risks because of the video. After you confronted me with the pictures of him and me, it really bothered him. He said the right decision was to eliminate the threat. The way you moved your chest, trying to aim the camera, was obvious. He insisted they couldn't leave until the threat was neutralized. Not knowing if the phone was password protected, they were willing to take it with them and return it later after clearing it. Elliot suggested I delete the entries in front of you to prevent this. I see. And why in the world did they think you would agree to do such a thing to your husband? Because I gave them my word, Brian. I don't understand. What do you not understand? Didn't you give me your word to remain faithful to me on our wedding day? Her silence after my remarks spoke volumes. Honey, I don't want you to think I'm on their side. I'm not at all. Isn't that so? What if the situation were reversed? If 3 men had grabbed you in our home, do you think I would have just stood by and allowed it? What choice would you have, Brian? 3 of them would have taken you easily. Maybe, but knowing that wouldn't stop me. Hell, it wouldn't even slow me down. I might get beaten, but not before doing a lot of damage myself. I'd fight for you because we're a team. At least we used to be. Last night, you didn't act like my wife. You acted like one of them. I'm sorry you can't see it through my eyes, Brian. I explained about the phone. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing more to say, is there? I replied. You're right on this topic, she admitted. How did you know about these photos, Brian? I'd like to know. I'm sure you would. What if one of your friends wasn't as committed to your group as the others and delivered these photos to me? How would you feel about that? Who? Please tell me who. Male or female? She asked urgently. I can't tell, Tracy. Why? I gave my word, I replied with a smirk. Realizing her questions were going nowhere, she shifted the topic. We were invited to join them. This is a wonderful opportunity, don't you see? We can grow closer to each other and learn to please each other in ways we never dreamed of before. This will strengthen our marriage. How is this working so far? Our marriage is hanging by a thread. I already feel closer to you, I said sarcastically. Don't be like that. You didn't even try. You don't know what it's like, Brian. Our night life has been so boring, mundane, and unimaginative that you're afraid we can't survive as a couple without inviting other people into our bedroom. I didn't say that. It doesn't mean we can't survive without it. But don't you want to do more than just survive? Shouldn't we take opportunities to strengthen our marriage when they arise? What would be the harm? The harm, as I see it, is that it destroys the trust we once had. That's what you've already done with your experiments. Instead of strengthening our marriage, it's tearing it apart. Perhaps no one else around you considers loyalty a worthy quality, but I do. Obviously, your friends don't think much of it. They proved it last night. I don't trust you anymore, Tracy. Ever since I saw those 3 photos, I've been wondering who you're with. You can have fun today. You've proven that you're quite capable of doing whatever you want behind my back. If it's so important to you and you believe in it so much, why didn't you come to me first and talk about it before you jumped into bed with another man? Because I knew how you would react. I thought that if I could participate and understand the benefits of it, I could bring home everything I learned and we would both benefit from it. Once you saw the improvement in me and my attitude towards night, I hope that you would recognize the value of it and agree with enthusiasm. So essentially, you and this smug group consider yourselves to come from a position of higher enlightenment and understanding, believing that lower beings like me must be gradually trained to slowly grasp the truths of life that you too somehow instinctively see. How elitist of you to generously allow your superior knowledge to flow down to this lowly peasant. I had no idea how happy I was. Sarcasm dripped from my every word, and she felt it. For several days, I searched for information about Elliot and Gail Franklin, hoping to find their connection to the group. I only found one Elliot Franklin in public records, a homeless man arrested for soliciting downtown. The photo and age didn't match the man who slept with Tracy. Frustrated, I decided to dig deeper. Tracy was set to be served divorce papers at 10 a.m. Friday. I had a meeting with building maintenance managers that morning, conveniently aligning with my plan. My secretary was informed to handle calls, and I left my phone on silent. I wanted Tracy to have time to process the shock before we talked. Later, when I returned to work, I called her back. She quickly moved away from others to answer. Finally, are you serious? Suing me in front of my friends? Do you understand how humiliating that was for me? Are you really going to divorce me over this? I told you it was nothing, Brian. When will you understand that? Why aren't you answering the phone? Why are you refusing to talk to me about this? My secretary should have told you I was at a building maintenance manager's meeting. I just got back and called you right away. I have work to do, Tracy. It doesn't stop just because you want to talk. As for conversations, when did I refuse to talk? You're the one avoiding me these past 2 days. I never turned down a conversation. I'm talking to you now, aren't I? But let's continue this after work. She cried into the phone. I don't want a divorce, she sobbed. Please, Brian, don't divorce me. We'll talk tonight, okay, Tracy? Okay, she said, still sobbing. I love you. Then see you tonight. Goodbye, Tracy. After my final work meeting, I left early, knowing Friday nights were quieter. However, I realized I couldn't avoid the inevitable. It was time to face this problem and talk to Tracy face to face. Realizing that she might not be in the mood to cook that night, I bought dinner at Chick-fil-A and texted her about it. She arrived shortly after me. I took Bobby's bag and carried him out of the car and into the house. She rushed toward me, hugging me as I held our boy in my arms, knowing that I wouldn't push her away abruptly and upset Bobby. I sat him in his high chair and helped feed him. Toddlers can definitely be messy eaters. He was at the stage where he loved to throw food, so there was very little left on his tray in front of him to throw. She thanked me for the takeout. We both spoke kindly to Bobby and managed to appear happy, although she sometimes shed tears while doing so. I spent most of the evening with him, never moving far from his side until he was put to bed again. He was my support, my goal, my reason to endure these difficult circumstances. Later that evening, I walked into the living room where she was sitting with the divorce papers in her hands. She took a deep breath to calm herself before speaking. I'm sorry, Brian. Okay, is that what you wanted to hear? To be honest, this is the first apology you've offered me since this all started. What exactly are you apologizing for, Tracy? I'm sorry you saw those photos and found out about it that way. I can only imagine how it must have shocked you. I understand you regret what I found out, but not that you cheated on me. Understood? Don't say that. Elliot said that once you realize the benefits of our community, you will accept it and join our group on an intimate level because of the freedom you'll get by being with other women, just like I will with other men. Naturally, he said so. It appears that you and Elliot both made the same mistake by not consulting me beforehand on matters such as infidelity. It's a pity that you believed his words more than mine about my character. Contrary to popular belief, Elliot is not a repository of information about me or our marriage. He can be an expert in many things, but when it comes to knowing me, he is an absolute failure, just like you seem to have turned out to be. Listen, honey, I now realize that I approached this completely wrong. You're right. I should have come to you first before I got involved in this without you knowing. After you saw my reaction that night, Elliot told me that in retrospect, if I had approached you first, the outcome would have been much better. He is still confident that you will agree in the end, but now I'm not so sure anymore. Please call off this stupid divorce and let's start over. Let's get back on track. Tracy, this train has derailed and caused irreparable damage. There is no way to get it back on the tracks. You blew it up with dynamite when you let that idiot into your bed and then betrayed me on top of it all. Just sign the papers and let's both pick up the pieces of our lives and move forward on separate paths. I know you, Brian. You don't want Bobby to grow up in a broken home, raised by two parents living in separate houses. If I get married again, you don't want him calling another man daddy. No man wants that for his son. Think about it. Reconciliation is the best option for both of us. Perhaps you should have thought about all this before you betrayed your vows, not after. You're right. I would hate to hear him call another man daddy. But it's better to grow up in a broken home than live in a house full of lies, deception, and debauchery. Even if we had not divorced, I would still never have participated in your group of libertines. They may be physically attractive, but to me, they are repulsive. You would continue to have nights with just anyone, but that would never happen to me. I could never be intimate with you again, Tracy. Remember that. You don't mean it. You're just saying it to hurt me, and it really does. So, score yourself a point, Brian. Look, what if I completely give up on this idea? I swear I'll never participate again. Nothing like that with them. What if I turn my back on them as friends? I'm desperate, darling. You and Bobby are the two best things that have ever happened to me in my entire life. I'm sorry that you think I turned my back on us, but it's not like that. I value you both above everything else. I can hear the words coming out of your mouth, Tracy, but I just don't believe you. You've already proven that you can lie. I can't trust anything you say now. It's too little too late. Just sign the papers and let's get this over with as soon as possible. Realizing that she might not be in the mood to cook that night, I bought dinner at Chick-fil-A and texted her about it. She arrived shortly after me. I took Bobby's bag, carried him out of the car, and into the house. She rushed toward me, hugging me as I held our boy in my arms, knowing I wouldn't push her away abruptly and upset Bobby. I sat him in his high chair and helped feed him. Toddlers are definitely messy eaters. He was at the stage where he loved to throw food, so there was very little left on his tray in front of him to throw. She thanked me for the takeout. We both spoke kindly to Bobby and managed to appear happy, although she sometimes shed tears while doing so. I spent most of the evening with him, never moving far from his side until he was put to bed again. He was my support, my goal, my reason to endure these difficult circumstances. Later that evening, I walked into the living room where she was sitting with the divorce papers in her hands. She took a deep breath to calm herself before speaking. "I'm sorry, Brian. Okay? Is that what you wanted to hear? To be honest, this is the first apology you've offered me since this all started. What exactly are you apologizing for, Tracy? I'm sorry you saw those photos and found out about it that way. I can only imagine how it must have shocked you. I understand you regret that I found out, but not that you cheated on me." "Understood. Don't say that. Elliot said that once you realize the benefits of our community, you will accept it and join our group on an intimate level because of the freedom you'll get by being with other women, just like I will with other men. Naturally, he said so. It appears that you and Elliot both made the same mistake by not consulting me beforehand on matters such as infidelity. It's a pity that you believed his words more than mine about my character. Contrary to popular belief, Elliot is not a repository of information about me or our marriage. He can be an expert in many things, but when it comes to knowing me, he is an absolute failure, just like you seem to have turned out to be. Listen, honey, I now realize that I approached this completely wrong. You're right. I should have come to you first before I got involved in this without you knowing. After you saw my reaction that night, Elliot told me that, in retrospect, if I had approached you first, the outcome would have been much better. He is still confident that you will agree in the end, but now I'm not so sure anymore. Please call off this stupid divorce, and let's start over. Let's get back on track. Tracy, this train has derailed and caused irreparable damage. There is no way to get it back on the tracks. You blew it up with dynamite when you let that idiot into your bed and then betrayed me on top of it all. Just sign the papers, and let's both pick up the pieces of our lives and move forward on separate paths. I will never sign those damn papers in my life. I don't want a divorce, and I will fight you every step of the way, no matter how long it takes. I may have lost you for now, Brian, but I intend to get you back. I'm not giving up on us. I have more faith in us than you do. I'll crawl to you on my knees until you take me back. It's a pity that you didn't have faith in us to stay true to your wedding vows. You've heard the old saying, once a cheater, always a cheater, and through this prism, I will always look at you. She began to cry again, perhaps realizing that she had an impossible task ahead of her. Now what? She asked. I hope you don't expect me to leave. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here with Bobby. Besides, neither of us has anywhere to go, she said. You're right about that. With you out of the picture for me, Bobby has become my whole world. I don't want to spend any more time away from him than necessary. So, I've decided to continue living here while the divorce is going on. She jumped for joy, clapping her hands. Don't worry, I'll stay away from you. I'll no longer expect you to wash my clothes, cook my lunches, or clean up after me. You take care of your needs, I take care of mine, and we both will take care of Bobby. All I ask is that you avoid touching me. To me, you are a walking disease from head to toe, disgusting to look at, disgusting to think about, and impossible to continue the marriage. We both will coexist under the same roof, but it will always only coexist until divorce occurs, which will never lead to reconciliation. Her joy soon turned to despondency as she realized what I had just said. I heard what you said, Brian, but divorce is a long way off, and we both know that a lot can happen over a long period of time. I'm going to get you back, honey. I swear I will, as long as you continue to meet and talk with your so-called friends. I don't have a chance in hell if I'll never be around them again, as you so clearly pointed out. I don't own you or have control over your behavior, but if you ever bring one of yours here to this house, I swear on my life that you and they will seriously regret it. Understand? Of course, honey. I already told you that I would turn my back on them if that's what it takes to get you back. Do you want me to quit and become a full-time housewife? No, it's too late now. Besides, if you did, it would only increase my alimony payments in the divorce. She didn't like my remark, but kept a cheerful smile for my sake. I decided that our days of confrontation were behind us. There was nothing she could say now that would make me lose my temper and rebuke her again. Both of us had suffered enough from insults and innuendos. I could be professional both at work and at home. I decided to treat this as a temporary business arrangement. Nothing was allowed to interfere with my time with my son. For a couple of weeks, we had short, polite conversations, talking only about what was necessary. Surprisingly, we agreed with some of my lawyer's suggestions. In the interim, I would pay all the rent if Tracy paid all the utilities. Separating from her financially was not as difficult as I expected. Since I was still paying the bulk of our expenses, she was amenable. I transferred half of our savings to a new account in my name only and left the remaining amount in the account in her name only. She became quite angry with me for a few days after this, but soon realized that I was only complying with what was outlined in my terms of the divorce agreement, which she still politely refused to sign. Tracy often asked me how we could get back to a loving relationship if I never gave her a chance. Yet, she never signed the divorce papers. It took an entire year, 6 months after filing the lawsuit, for progress to occur. B. Thorne, my lawyer, contacted me to say that Tracy's lawyer had successfully achieved a court order mandating 10 family counseling sessions. These sessions were to occur twice a week, and my attendance was non-negotiable. Additionally, I was required to engage and respond to every question the counselor asked. When I inquired if I could answer each question with the same simple sentence, B responded, "I don't care what you say, as long as you say something relevant to your marriage." I thanked her and hung up. The sessions began, and as expected, the counselor, selected by Tracy's lawyer, was clearly sympathetic to her side, often finding subtle ways to place blame on me. Nevertheless, I remained composed. I answered every question and statement from both Tracy and the therapist with the same unwavering response. I do not want to remain married to a woman who is cheating. It didn't take long for both women to become visibly irritated by my persistence. Despite the mounting frustration directed at me, I never raised my voice, insulted anyone, or used a harsh word. My calm demeanor frustrated them even further. After the 5th session, the therapist canceled the remaining meetings, citing them as unproductive and a waste of time. The months that followed were uneventful but tense. I spent as much time as possible with Bobby, and the bond between us grew stronger. Tracy, however, grew increasingly desperate. A few days before our final divorce hearing, she moved out of the house and took Bobby with her. Soon after, I was served with a restraining order barring me from contacting either of them until the court date. V. Thorne contacted me shortly afterward with a somber tone. "Brian, I tried to warn you. Tracy is now claiming that you abused her on 3 separate occasions. She alleges that she didn't report the incidents at the time because she hoped for reconciliation, valuing a 2-parent household for Bobby above all else. Her lawyer has submitted medical records, including evidence of bruises, to support her claims. She's also countersuing for full custody, requesting that you only have rare, supervised visitation through CPS. I was stunned. B. Not a word of this is true. You know me better than that. I needed to hear it directly from you, B replied. I will fight tooth and nail for you, but without irrefutable evidence disproving her claims, it's going to be an uphill battle. Did her lawyer provide any specifics about these so-called incidents? Yes, I have the details in a file in my office. I'll email them to you, but until I tell you otherwise, you cannot contact Tracy or Bobby in any way. Do you understand? Understood, I replied firmly. 2 days later, I returned home from work and was shocked to see Tracy sitting at the kitchen table. Her car was nowhere in sight. so she must have arrived with someone else. Brian, turn around and listen to me, she called loudly as I hesitated near the door. If you ever want to see Bobby again, you'll hear me out. Caught off guard, I paused. I made no move to approach her, choosing instead to maintain a safe distance, wary of the restraining order. Don't worry, she continued. You don't have to say a word. Just listen. First, give me your cell phone. I placed it on the table, and she promptly turned it off. Brian, I tried to reason with you, but you left me no choice. This was the only way to gain leverage. I fabricated the abuse allegations to ensure full custody of Bobby and to give myself a stronger position. I know you would never lay a hand on me. You never have, but you've been so stubborn about this divorce that I had to resort to desperate measures. I clenched my fists but said nothing, my anger boiling beneath the surface. I'm sorry it had to come to this, she said, feigning remorse. But it's not too late. If you call off the divorce and agree to join our group as they suggested, I'll lift the restraining order and move back home. Bobby won't have to grow up in a broken home. Her words hung in the air, but I remained silent, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a response. Finally, I spoke with a calm that masked my fury. So, you're admitting you lied in court documents to manipulate me? And now you're attempting to blackmail me into staying in a marriage that you destroyed? Brian, don't be dramatic. I did this for Bobby, for our family. This is a chance for us to rebuild everything. I shook my head. No, Tracy. You've done nothing but ensure that this family will never be whole again. Your lies, deceit, and betrayal have consequences, ones you'll soon face. Her expression faltered, but she quickly recovered, doubling down on her demands. If you think I'll sign those divorce papers and let you win, you're wrong. I'll fight you with everything I have, Brian. Without another word, I picked up my phone and walked out of the room. This battle was far from over, but one thing was certain. I would not back down. Tracy often asked how we could rebuild our relationship if I never gave her a chance. This time, however, her demeanor was more confident, more manipulative. We'll raise Bobby together, Brian, she said. Under the same roof, happily. Think about it. What's holding you back? You'll see. You'll get used to it quickly, she added with a coy smile. I'll even show you some new tricks I've learned if you're ready. It might be too soon, but what do you say, Brian? Will you stop being so stubborn and try living in the real world for a change? I promise you'll have a great time. I looked her squarely in the eyes, my expression carefully neutral. So, what you're saying is if I agree to your terms and accept your lifestyle, you won't limit my access to Bobby in any way. Her face softened. Why would I ever want to keep a loving father away from his son? Bobby loves you so much, Brian. He asks for you constantly. It breaks my heart to keep him from you. Her voice took on a pleading tone. Just say yes, Brian. Say yes, and everything will go back to normal. All our problems will disappear. I choked back my frustration. First, I lost you. Then I lost my son. My life is unbearable without him. I miss him so much, I said, tears stinging my eyes. Tracy leaned closer, her voice a whisper. Then just say yes, Brian. It's that simple. I need time to think, I replied. I have to figure out how I can share you with other men. Just give me some time. Her smile widened triumphantly. Of course, honey. I get it. You're an engineer. You analyze everything. Then her tone turned cold. But remember, we have a court hearing in 2 days. I need to hear from you tomorrow. Just send me one word, yes. If you don't, I promise, Brian, I will make your life hell. Your son will grow up hating you, calling another man daddy. Please don't make me do this. Do it for Bobby's sake. Her words pierced me, her manipulation cutting deep. Bobby was my world. I'll think about it, I said, my voice trembling. I'll let you know. She walked past me, grinning. As the door closed behind her, I saw a sleek Lexus pull up, driven by none other than Elliot Franklin. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Elliot wasn't just a friend to Tracy. He was the architect of this twisted scenario. At the court hearing, I arrived early and tried to steel myself for what lay ahead. Tracy spotted me in the hallway and spat venomously. You had your chance, you idiot. Now I'm going to destroy you. Your son will never know your name. He'll call someone else daddy, a real man, not a weak, insecure fool like you. Her words were calculated to wound, and the onlookers gasped in shock. I wiped my face with a handkerchief and sat in silence, waiting for the proceedings to begin. When the judge called the case to order, Tracy was the first to testify. With tears streaming down her face, she recounted fabricated stories of abuse, citing specific dates, times, and places. Her lawyer presented medical records to corroborate her claims. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and her smirk as she stepped down from the witness stand was like a dagger to my heart. Then my lawyer, B, called her surprise witness, James Winford McMahon. As he took the stand, Tracy's confident facade faltered. She exchanged nervous glances with her lawyer, who looked equally puzzled. "Please state your occupation for the court," B said. "I'm a private investigator," James replied. "And what were you hired to do?" "I was hired to investigate the claims made by Mrs. Tracy Wilson." B turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I submit evidence that will directly contradict Mrs. Wilson's testimony." She handed over a stack of documents, including time-stamped photos and videos. The courtroom was silent as the evidence played out. Surveillance footage showed Tracy at a spa on the days she claimed to have been injured by me. Photographs captured her meeting Elliot Franklin at a restaurant on one of the dates she cited as an abuse incident. The medical records her lawyer submitted were revealed to be from cosmetic treatments, not injuries. As the truth unraveled, Tracy's composure crumbled. The judge's stern gaze bore into her. "Mrs. Wilson, do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" Tracy stammered, I only wanted what's best for my son." The judge shook his head. "This court takes false allegations very seriously. Not only have you attempted to manipulate this court, but you've also weaponized your child against his father. This behavior is reprehensible." In the end, the restraining order was lifted, and I was granted joint custody of Bobby. Tracy's attempts to destroy me had backfired spectacularly, and Elliot's influence was laid bare. As I left the courtroom, I felt a surge of relief, but also sadness. Bobby would grow up in a fractured home, but at least he would know the truth. Tracy's lawyer sat in stony silence as Jim McMahon continued to deliver his damning testimony. The courtroom was tense, with the audience hanging on every word. Jim's professionalism and detailed explanations left no room for doubt. "Thank you, Jim. Could you tell the court where you work and what your business does?" B asked. "Yes, ma'am. I own and operate McMahon Investigations and Security," he replied confidently. "And how did you come to know my client, Mr. Wilson?" Jim leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "He approached me about 14 months ago. He was concerned about his wife, Mrs. Tracy Wilson, suspecting infidelity, but had no proof. We specialize in private investigations, so he contracted us to confirm or refute his suspicions." "And what did your investigation uncover?" B inquired. "We obtained evidence of her infidelity, including 3 photographs documenting her interactions with another man," Jim answered without hesitation. "Were those photographs the only copies?" "No, ma'am. We maintain backups of all files on secure cloud servers to ensure the integrity and chain of evidence. The copies Mr. Wilson received were duplicates. Do you have copies with you today?" "Yes, ma'am. These are identical to the originals stored on our servers," Jim said, holding up a set of photographs. B turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit these photographs into evidence." The judge examined the photographs briefly before nodding. "Accepted." B turned back to Jim. "Was that the extent of your work with Mr. Wilson?" "No, ma'am. He also wanted a way to monitor ongoing activity at his home. I suggested installing hidden surveillance cameras and microphones to record any suspicious interactions." "And did Mr. Wilson hire you to install such a system?" "Yes, we installed a surveillance system that streamed data to a secure server. The system was tamper-proof, ensuring Mr. Wilson could not manipulate the recordings. His only interaction was replacing camera batteries." At this, Tracy's lawyer leaped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This so-called evidence is inadmissible. It's invasive and could easily have been tampered with." The judge raised a hand to halt the outburst. "Let's establish the facts. Mr. McMahon, please explain how your system ensures data integrity." Jim described the setup in detail. "The cameras transmit directly to a laptop hidden under the house, which streams the data to our secure cloud servers. Mr. Wilson had no access to raw recordings, and the laptop itself stored no files except for the server's address. The judge nodded. Overruled. The evidence is admissible. Tracy's lawyer sat down, visibly deflated. Beat pressed on. Jim, did you review recordings corresponding to the dates of the alleged abuse? Yes, ma'am. Each recording showed a quiet household. Mr. Wilson was often playing with his son, while Mrs. Wilson was in another room. There was no evidence of abuse. The courtroom murmured as the gravity of Jim's words sank in. Tracy squirmed in her seat, visibly agitated. Beat continued. Jim, do you have any additional evidence to offer? Yes, I do. I have a transcript of a phone call Mrs. Wilson made before moving out. In this conversation, she admits to planning to stage injuries and blame her husband to gain leverage in court. The original recording is available if needed. Tracy's lawyer shot to his feet again. Objection. Hearsay. Jim calmly replied. The transcript is an accurate reflection of her words, and I can produce the recording if necessary. The judge sighed. Overruled. Beat concluded. Thank you, Jim, for your testimony. You've been very helpful. Jim stepped down, his presence leaving a palpable impact on the courtroom. Tracy's lawyer, clearly rattled, glanced at her client, whose confidence was now thoroughly shaken. The judge addressed the courtroom. Given the evidence presented today, this court finds that the allegations against Mr. Wilson are not credible. The restraining order is lifted immediately, and we will proceed with the divorce and custody hearings. As the judge's gavel struck, Tracy's face fell, and Brian felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The truth had finally come to light, and justice, at least for the moment, had prevailed. The lawyer sat down after confirming there were no further questions. Judge Feldman turned to Tracy's lawyer and asked, "Do you wish to cross-examine this witness?" Devastated, her lawyer shook his head. "No questions, Your Honor. Mr. McMahon, you may step down," the judge instructed. "Thank you for your testimony." Jim returned to his seat, his testimony having left an undeniable impact. Judge Feldman turned back to the courtroom. It is clear to this court that Mr. Wilson has been the victim of baseless accusations designed to manipulate the custody proceedings. The allegations of abuse have been thoroughly discredited. Mrs. Wilson, you have committed false statements to this court, a felony offense punishable by up to 36 months in prison. This hearing's recording will be forwarded to the district attorney's office for further investigation. The judge paused, her gaze sharp as she addressed Tracy. I hope charges will be filed against you. I hereby grant full custody of Bobby Wilson to his father, Brian Wilson. Mrs. Wilson will have visitation rights at Mr. Wilson's discretion. Mr. Wilson, I strongly urge you to be generous with visitation. Your child deserves time with his mother. I nodded in acknowledgement. The judge continued, regarding alimony, while I am inclined to deny it due to Mrs. Wilson's actions, I will allow $1,000 per month for 42 months. Each party will retain their respective vehicles. The bank accounts will be split equally based on the balances at the time of filing. Retirement accounts will remain with their respective holders. Since Mr. Wilson is the primary custodian, child support will not be ordered. The judge then turned to me. Mr. Wilson, do you plan to continue living in the current residence? I stood and replied, No, Your Honor. I don't wish to remain there. Mrs. Wilson may continue renting if she chooses, but I will move out. The judge nodded. The lease will remain at Mrs. Wilson's discretion. Mrs. Wilson, you have 8 hours to return the child to Mr. Wilson. Failure to comply will result in contempt of court charges. Do you understand? Tearfully, Tracy responded, Yes, Your Honor. Good. I suggest you settle this matter before leaving the courthouse. All restraining orders are lifted, and the divorce petition is granted. Both parties will receive their final divorce decree within 30 days. Tracy looked utterly defeated as she processed the judge's words. She approached me after the hearing to discuss returning Bobby. If you don't mind, Brian, I'd like to bring Bobby to you after dinner tonight. I want a little more time with him before I hand him over. You don't have to rush, I replied calmly. I'll be moving to a new apartment today. I've already found a furnished place. Here's the address. You can drop Bobby off tomorrow at noon. I handed her a piece of paper with my new address. She nodded sadly and said, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never wanted things to end like this. Life with me was so dull, wasn't it? Now you're free to enjoy the thrilling lifestyle you craved without me," I said coldly. "Good luck with your open marriage." She didn't respond to my jab but hesitated before saying, "Thank you, Brian, for not going after Elliot and Gail Franklin. They're really wonderful people. It's a shame you'll never get to know them like I do." "You're welcome," I said with an icy smile. "I don't care about Elliot or Gail. They don't exist to me. But you know who does interest me? Your employer. Did you know your company has strict harassment policies to protect its employees, particularly the women?" Her expression shifted to panic as I continued. "Tomorrow, I'll be filing a complaint against your company for gross negligence in enforcing those policies. Your manager, Ronald Hensley, will be the centerpiece of that complaint. From what I understand, he's been quite active with more than a dozen employees." Tracy's face turned pale as I added, "Oh, and in case you were wondering, I've known your lover's real name from the start. My private investigator is excellent at what he does. An engineer always approaches problems with knowledge, Tracy. Always." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. With that, I walked away, ready to move forward with my new life. If we don't have the answer, we find someone who does. That's our approach. My sharp and determined lawyer, B, filed a lawsuit against Tracy's call center for $1.2 million. In the end, we settled for a cool $1 million. From that amount, B kept $250,000 for her fees, and I received the remaining $750,000. On the very day I got the settlement check, I wrote Tracy a check for $442,000 in one lump sum. This amount fully covered my child support obligations with a significant surplus, paid by her own company, no less. With this financial freedom, I could finally focus on building my dream home. The rumor mill at work spun quickly, and it wasn't long before some single women started seeing me as a potential catch. But having just escaped the chaos of my marriage, I decided to prioritize my time and energy on Bobby instead of diving into the social dating scene. Free at last. So, what do you think of today's story? Personally, I found it captivating, full of unexpected twists and turns that kept me hooked until the very end. How about you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.